Chapter 26 of Under Boy Scout Colors by Joseph Bushnell Ames. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 26 The Wish of His Heart. And how swiftly those remaining days passed, with their mingling of work and play. There were more fishing excursions and athletic meets. One afternoon was devoted to an exciting treasure hunt. Another saw a sham battle in which part of the boys in boats attacked one of the islands defended by the remainder. At regular intervals, too, Captain Chalmers gave scout examinations in headquarters tent, and an encouraging number of fellows increased their standing or obtained merit badges. Dale Tompkins thoroughly enjoyed each minute of his stay. He entered with keen zest into every game and competition, and took his share of the various chores, even the hated dishwashing, without a grumble. It was all so fresh and wonderful that the simplicity and freedom of the life, with the nightly council fire under the stars, and the intimate companionship with so many dandy fellows, appealed to him intensely, even without considering the added interest of each day's activities. Best of all, perhaps, was his feeling of growing comfort in the attitude of Ranny Phelps. There had been nothing in the nature of a formal reconciliation. On the contrary, the blond lad's manner toward Tompkins still showed traces of embarrassment. But one does not always need the spoken word to realize the truth, and deep down in his heart Dale knew that, though they might not yet be close friends, at least no shadow of coldness or enmity remained between them. When the last day came, as last days have an unpleasant way of doing, Dale tried to think of the wonderful time he had had, instead of regretting that it was almost over. More than once, too, his mind dwelt with gratitude on the unknown customer whose need for birdhouses had made it all possible. "Maybe some day I'll find out who it was and be able to thank him," he said to himself during the course of the morning. A final trip in the motor boat had been planned for the afternoon, but after dinner Captain Chalmers announced that Mr. Thornton would inspect the camp at about 5 o'clock and stay for supper and the council fire afterward. "So I think we better put in a few hours making things spick and span and working up a specially good program for tonight," he concluded. "You fellows all know how keen I am to give him an extra good impression of scouting, and you've kept things in corking good shape these 2 weeks. But let's see if we can't give him a regular knockout blow when he comes." One and all, the scouts took up the idea enthusiastically and worked to such purpose that when the banker appeared he found a camp which would have done credit to the West Point cadets. He was a little stiff at first, but during supper in the big tent he thawed considerably, and later, at the council fire, he applauded the various stunts with the enjoyment and simple abandon, almost, of a boy. When these were over, he rose to his feet, and the firelight gleaming on his face showed it softened into lines of genial good fellowship. "I've had a mighty good time tonight, boys," he said, glancing around the circle of eager young faces. "I just want to thank you for it and tell you frankly that what I've seen of Hillsgrove Boy Scouts has changed my mind completely about the whole proposition. If you fellows are a fair sample of scouting generally, as I begin to suspect you are, I see no reason why you should not consider this camp a permanent thing to come back to every year and be responsible for and do with as you like. I should very much—" The wild yell of delight which went up drowned the remainder of his remarks. Leaping to his feet, McIlvaine called for a cheer, and the 3x3, with a tiger at the end, was given with a vigor that left no doubt of the boys' feelings. When comparative quiet was restored, Mr. Thornton thanked them briefly and said he would like to shake hands with every one of the scouts present. Laughing and jostling, the boys formed in line, and as each paused before the banker, Captain Chalmers introduced him. Tompkins was just behind Ranny, and he could not fail to notice the extra vigor Mr. Thornton put into his handshake. "I'm very glad to meet you, Phelps," he said genially. "Your father and I are old friends. In fact, I dined with him at Hillsgrove only a few days ago. And by the way, I was immensely taken with those birdhouses on the place, and want some like them for my own. He told me you had put them around just before you came down here. Did you make them yourself?" The usually self-contained Ranley turned crimson and dropped his eyes. No, sir," he stammered. "They were made by another. I'll write the address down and give it to you afterward." He passed on, and the boy behind him took his place. In a daze, Dale felt his hand shaken and heard the sound of Mr. Thornton's pleasant voice, but the words were as meaningless as if they had been spoken in another tongue. Muttering some vague reply, he dropped the other's hand and was swept on by the crowd behind. Out of the whirling turmoil of his mind, one thing alone stood forth sharply. Those were his birdhouses. They could not possibly be any other. It was Ranny who had given him these wonderful 2 weeks. Ranny, whom he thought. His head went up suddenly, and glancing around, he caught sight of the blond chap disappearing toward the beach. In a few moments he was at his side. "Ranny!" he exclaimed impulsively. You! Something gripped his throat, making further speech impossible. Phelps stirred uneasily. "Well," he said with a touch of defiance, "I wanted them, and I couldn't make them myself. I'm a perfect dub with tools." You did it too! Give me a chance at camp." Dale's voice was strained and uneven. His hand still rested on the other's arm, and in the brief silence that followed, he felt Ranny stiffen a little. "Ranny!" he exclaimed impulsively. You! "If I did, it was only fair," the older chap said suddenly, in low, abrupt tones. I've been a beastly cad, Dale. I've worked against you every way I could." His voice grew sharp and self-reproachful. "I kept it up like a stubborn mule, even when I began to see Why, look at the rotten, conceited way I kept you out of baseball. After that, it was only decent to do what I could to make up." They stood in the moonlight, the water at their feet, while back among the trees the fire blazed up, sending a shower of sparks drifting across the spangled heavens. The talk and laughter of the crowd gathered there seemed to come from very far away. You did it to square up, then?" Dale asked presently in a low tone. There was another pause. Suddenly an arm slid about his shoulders, and for the first time Ranny turned and looked him squarely in the eyes. "No," he answered quietly. "It was because I wanted us to be in camp together." Chapter 26